Hello, everyone. I don't know if you, yeah, you hear me. Well, hello, bonjour. I'm very pleased and honored to be here today with you. I'm a French journalist. My name is Nassira El Mouadem. I am the head of Bondi Blog, which is a media which publish stories about people who are living in the suburbs, the popular suburbs, poor suburbs around Paris, and gives voice to these voiceless people around the capital of France. I'm very pleased to have such amazing panelists and speakers with us today. The topic of our roundtable is the integration of migrants, and well, it's a special topic for me because I am from Moroccan origins. My father came from Morocco in France in the 70s. My father came here to work as a worker in the car industry. And it's also especially very sensitive nowadays in France because maybe you know that there is big debate in France about how to integrate and how to make a public policy, human public policy here in France about the integration of migrants. There is a bill held by the Home Office Ministry, Gérard Collomb, which has been very criticized nowadays for being repressive and very violent against the migrants, and maybe there will be some questions about it in the audience. But before giving the microphone to our speakers, I just wanted to introduce them for you. Sebene Echete, welcome. Thank you to be with us today. You are an advocacy coordinator of Generation 2.0 for rights, equality and diversity in Greece, right? Okay. Andreas Holstein, you are the mayor of Altena, located in the west of Germany. You led an interesting policy in favor of refugees, and maybe you can speak about this with us today. And we heard a lot about you in the French medias. It was in November 2017 when you were attacked with knife by an anti-refugee inhabitant in your city. Mina Jaff, you are the founder and the executive director of Women Refugee Route, an organization that focuses on women but also children refugees' rights, and you come from Denmark. At my right, Seema Malhotra. Thank you for being with us. You are a member of parliament, and you are also the chair of all-party parliamentary group of assistive technology, right? Thank you. And our last speaker, Rui Marques, thank you for being with us today. You are the Portuguese former High Commissioner of Migration and Integration, and you are also the founder of Ubuntu Academy, a program to help for integration of young immigrants, but also put bridges between immigrants and non-immigrants. And thank you for being with us. Just before giving the microphones to our speakers, just to give you this information, we have a poll with us for this roundtable. And the poll with this question, and maybe we will see it on the screen, right? The question is this one: where does migrant integration take place? 3 answers: school, work, and social groups. And you will see the answer of this poll at the end of our roundtable. So let's begin just with you, maybe Seema. What needs to be done to bring people together, migrants, sorry, but also native-born? The question is this one: what needs to be done to bring people together, migrants, but also native ones?
I'll talk more on this afterwards, but I think that the main thing is creating ways in which we build common purpose between people and actually start to find ways in which we stop people living parallel lives as a consequence of the way we structure society and policy, and start more ways in which people are actually integrating through having ways of joining together and being part of a nation together.
Can you just also talk about what you are doing as a member of parliament in the United Kingdom about this topic?
As a member of parliament, this is a very, very important topic for us. separately, I'm on the Select Committee for exiting the European Union, and Brexit has played a very big part in how we think about immigration in Britain, not least because one of the main drivers of the Brexit vote was a reaction to immigration in Britain. So the way we now tackle that is something that's on our national agenda, how we think about education and having education policy that is encouraging more ways in which people come together, how we think about integrating between our faith communities as well, having more ways in which, in my community, which is incredibly important, we have over 160 languages spoken in a very small area, about 5 square miles, in Hounslow in West London. The recipe and the possibility of people living very much side by side and coexisting rather than integrating is a very, very real issue. But also how we think about housing, how we think about the built environment, that matters in terms of who you have living side by side. How do we think about where and how we offer English classes so that you don't come to Britain and suddenly you're left in isolation, only able to communicate with people from the same country that you are from. How we think about the workplace as well, and integrating and having an approach to understand and manage diversity, not I think as what has been a consequence, where we have people in the workplace where diversity isn't really valued and we don't bring out the best that we have in Britain together. So there are a number of ways from a social and economic perspective that we're thinking about integration and thinking about immigration now more significantly as part of a holistic way that we think about the society we want to create and what we want to live in.
You. Maybe give you the microphone, Andreas, about what are you doing as a mayor, as a public policy to make the best integration of migrants in your area, in your Länder?
For me, integration is one of the most important politics on the local area. It's not a decision of politicians in the government or politicians in the regional government. It's a day-to-day decision of the civil society at the base. So it's also opportunity, and I think one reason because we are looking to refugees and to migration so frightened is that we until now have no instruments, no good tools to manage integration. During centuries, people came and they have to integrate. And now we learned more and more that we have to manage, that we have to do something for integration even when we are still here. And in Germany there's also a word which is for me horrible, Bio-Deutsch. That means everyone who's there since generations. My grandma came from Lithuania. Am I German or not? I'm German. So, and perhaps in 20 years there are many people coming from Syria or from Africa here to Europe, and they will be Europeans as we are. We are colorful and we have good ideas, and this is a criteria which is useful for the future and to generate a future. And I think this to manage the civil society, the engagement of the town halls, and to feel the people that there is a society which is working and acting by heart. This is a main thing we have to create, and we have no solutions for that. And the main focus is to the big cities, which are always attractive for newcomers, because everyone who is coming from Africa knows, of course, Paris. But nobody, for example, will know our twin town in the north of France, or in Germany is the same. Nobody will know Altena, but everyone will know Berlin. So they are going there, but we have to create in the rural areas for our own future, to have their schools, to have their good companies, a future where they are a part in. And this is very important. Yeah,
and you were mentioning the role of the civil society. Maybe let's move to you, Mina Jaff. You are the director of Women Refugee Route. Can you talk about your mission? Because if I understood well, you really focus on rights of refugees.
I have a microphone here, but before I will go on and talk specifically about how we in my organization put gender perspective into the asylum system. I would like to give the question back to the audience today, because this will not often happen. So on the topic of integrated migrant, I have prepared actually a few questions for you. And for those who might be from Denmark, did you know when the Queen Margrethe celebrate her 70th birthday? And for those who are from UK, which we have some here and maybe some in the audience, I would like to know what is the height of the Big Ben. And for the rest, I will actually like to know if do you work with any groups that linked to terrorism? Maybe you know and maybe you don't know, but for me, and that's actually doesn't matter usually, but for me it's this, because after living in Denmark 80 years, no, actually now 20 years, but after I was living there for 18 years and need to take the citizen test, I failed because of these questions. So this is how you see the integration can go. And to tell a bit about myself, I'm from Kurdistan and I fled when I was born during the Kimli gas attack in 88. I ended up after 10 years living in Denmark, where I have been crossing Denmark, Germany, many other countries to settle finally in Denmark. And now who I am, a Dane, a feminist, a founder of an NGO, or integrated migrant. I decided to be here today as a founder and director of Women Refugee Route and as an expert. And I can tell you more about what we do in our organization. What has been important for me to include in our work is to put gender perspective into the asylum process, and also especially to decision how women and girls can be an active actor in change for the political change. A political decision, because I have been seeing over and over and doing also my experience that women and girls haven't been able to be part of decision, and not because we don't have a voice, because of course we have, you hear my voice, and this is just, we need a safe space to be able to come out and be active for our change. So what we do is actually doing training for the volunteers to supporting the refugee to be able to be sensitive to what they are going through, but also doing advocacy training for refugee women on the ground. Our organization have just been there for 2 years, but we have been doing great work when it comes to advocacy. But I can tell you, it has been really hard being a woman myself, and also being always seen as a refugee and doing advocacy work, because often I have been participating to many different high-level events where I have been addressing women and women in conflict, such as last year in Security Council, but I often see those who are addressing these issues with me is often men in middle age who really haven't had experience in the field with the refugee women themselves, and they are deciding on behalf of them. And that also means that today I'm actually very privileged because I'm sitting here, because with the fund of OECD I will not be able to be here if I was one of my colleagues who are not able to travel here. And I'm happy we talk about so much about technology and women in teach. So I hope for next year that OECD will be able to bring the voice of those, because of the lack of the logistic, they wouldn't be support them. They can be with us and raise their voice and be part of the change and part of the decision making.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you for these words. Let's move to you, Sebene Eshete. Can you just give some words about your work with Generation 2.0? Is it an NGO, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you just speak about this?
Okay. Thank you. I'm Sebene Eshete. I'm the advocacy coordinator of Generation 2.0. I myself am a second-generation migrant, meaning that I am the child of Ethiopian migrants that arrived in Greece in the 70s. So this group that I'm representing today began as a community-led organization in 2006 with it was more of an informal group back then, whose goal was to advocate for the right to documentation and eventually to Greek citizenship for the second generation. Because back then, there was no provision for this specific group of people, so when we became 18 years old, we would find ourselves again in the position of a migrant that had just arrived. And we managed to do a lot of community work and also challenge the dominant narrative around migrants. Our work was mostly around raising awareness of our existence in the Greek society, on the fact that we have that have been brought up along with the children of Greek citizens, and we had a lot to offer, and we are an integral part of the society. This was a long process. There was a law in 2010 which was recognizing jus soli, the birthright citizenship, which was cancelled from the Council of State. So again, we had to repeat the same campaign over and over until 2015, where we managed to pass the law on citizenship for the second generation. And at the moment, I can say that 83,000 people with migrant backgrounds have had already access to Greek citizenship. But apart from that, apart from the access to the Greek citizenship, our goal is to use the tools that we have as a bridge among migrant communities and the rest of the Greek society, and promote participation of migrants in all other aspects. So we want to promote the existence of migrant communities in the decision-making process, first of all, when we talk about integration policies, but also we want this to expand more and more on other issues that concern all citizens. So in this way, we can create more visibility and visualize the fact that we have more to share.
There is a kind of similarity with your own program, right? You, Marcus, with the Ubuntu Academy. Can you just give some elements about what you are doing with your academy that you founded?
Okay. Thank you so much for your question. Ubuntu Leaders Academy start with this idea. Ubuntu means I am because you are. I am a person through the other persons.
In which language?
Is a Zulu language, and it was very important for Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu to propose to the South African society a transition, a peaceful transition for a rainbow society. And we catch this idea to Europe, and actually to the whole world, to engage young people as leaders, as servant leaders, to build bridges. And I think this topic connects with our main theme. The idea of integrated migrants is, for me, a whole society learning process to build bridges and also to avoid to destroy them. And we need all of us to learn to build bridges. And with Ubuntu Academy, we empower young people, not only coming from the background migrants, but also the national people and make this intercultural group to be part of this process of Ubuntu. We think the world needs Ubuntu in nowadays, and especially for integrated migrants, we think this is a very inspiring idea.
Yeah, and making integration of migrants, it's building bridges, but also struggling against stereotypes. In your own experience, Andreas Holstein, does personal contact help overcome prejudices?
I think everyone from us has to stand his woman or his man in daily work, and if you are acting for a higher goal, you have pressure which is against you, and if you're looking for Front National in France, or if you're looking for AfD in Germany, or if you go to Poland, or if you go to Hungary, it's a pity which picture Europe is presenting to the young generation, and this was for us in 2015 and for all parties in our parliament the reason to say, okay, we have to take refugees because of a law, and we would be willing to take more, because at this time I saw the situation in Idomeni, in Lesbos and in Samos, because I'm engaged there also a little bit, and I thought this is not the Europe I would handle over to my children or to the next generations. And this was a reason for the decision for us and to take more. And many people inside the little community in Altena were engaged in the months and in the years after, and even now. And it was the right solution, even if there was a situation in November which was dangerous for me, but this might happen every day in traffic or somewhere else. So I think we need politicians, and we need many people on a local level who live for their ideas. And my idea is a friendly Europe, taking migrants not only because of benefit or humanity. We need them. We have a situation where we get less and less children, and demographic change is not also only a theme for scientific researchers. It's also a question of reality, and if we will find a solution, we only find the solution together. And many people in the world are in the situation that they need migration, and we need migration in the very rich countries in Europe too, and to form a Europe, a common Europe, as everyone is speaking on the high level of politics. I think we need it really, but we have to solve the fear, we have to overcome the fear, we have to find solutions, how to integrate, and this learn process, this building bridges, the picture is right, I think. Then we are at the beginning, and we have to force this process in Portugal, in Hungary, in Greece, and this is a duty of the generation which is now in power and in charge, and it's a necessity in the eyes of the younger generation, which I see here.
And it's a collective question, it's a collective debate, yeah. Maybe a question for each of you, and just let's jump to the question if you want to make an answer or make a remark. What partners need to be around the table to design and implement successful migrants integration in your own perspective? Yeah.
Well, as I mentioned before, I believe it's crucial that we include older migrant communities in the process, because they have an experience which is irreplaceable. And from my experience and the communities that we work with, I have understood that it's crucial to also give a lot of competencies to the local authorities. We see that in Greece specifically, that the local authorities have played a very important role in implementing integration policies, and to create a platform for a more essential exchange to happen among the citizens. But apart from that, generally I'm speaking specifically about in the Greek context, yes. We see that there is a big need for coordination among different policy aspects. We see that perhaps a lot of things are decided on the migration policy ministry, but there is no coordination with the employment ministry or with the social insurance issues. So in our case, we think it's important that all aspects are included, which I believe we are on the same page here. Yeah.
I think that really does highlight the complexity of this. If you're to do integration effectively, then you have to involve different agencies. It's not just a matter for the Home Ministry or the Home Office. In fact, it works against effective integration when it simply becomes around immigration status and what that gets wrapped up with in domestic security. And I think that we've become very kind of insular about it. We see immigration as a security issue, and it is now a redefinition of the conversation. We need to be looking at it as a social and an economic issue. What has struck me as well is how we've got to have a clear goal around immigration. Now, if you think about my family, my parents came to Britain in the 1960s. Now, I was lucky from India. And I was, you know, they'd been, my families had been refugees during partition. So a generation before, they'd lost everything and built from nothing. My father decided as a result of that experience that he wanted to live abroad, and that was something that he managed to do. And we were born and grew up in London. Now, what my life is a story of is what I think we need to have as a goal now, which is that children's life chances and what they achieve should not be determined by their parents' background. My parents both had good jobs. My father is an engineer, my mother is a teacher, and they were both able to speak English before they came to the UK. But my mum taught in schools across Hounslow. She would have taught thousands of children, and they would have been children who didn't have English as a first language. Now, we invested a lot in that. That's one of the areas that has actually been cut hugely by local authority cuts, or cuts to local authorities. And I think we've ended up in a difficult situation, which has almost been a perfect storm of the crisis of 2008 that led to austerity, the cuts to local government. And if I give some perspective, in my local authority, over 40% of the local authority funding has been cut in the last 8 years. And that has had massive consequences for things that aren't the statutory responsibilities, like social care when people are in absolute need of healthcare support. And special needs teaching and support has been one of those consequences. So schools that can afford to find a little bit of budget are doing something. But otherwise, you're then looking at a generation of children growing up without that support. I think that's a really important principle and goal that we have to have back in social policy and economic policy and government policy, that we should be looking to the integration of children and what needs to happen with their parents as well in the workplace and in society. And I think the important question we have to ask is how well integration is happening. I'll just close my current comment with this point that we don't think it's happening very well in the UK, and there is a project going on that's called a national conversation happening with an organisation called British Futures that's looking at a different narrative around migration, and other bodies participating. And it is about having a conversation, 60 focus groups across the country, asking that question in our local communities. And what it's doing is bringing local people into that conversation, those who are migrants and those who, no, it's not a government project, those who are migrants and those who aren't migrants, alongside civic leaders and alongside others that have to have a voice in that conversation, so that integration is something being done with our communities and those that have become increasingly hostile, and how we change that and how we change it for the future is needing to be building links and bridges between people on the ground in our communities.
Yeah, I will make it very short now. I will also say that we also, in different member states in Europe, we really need to understand when we talk about integration, we don't see it as assimilation, because I feel it happened in Denmark. And integration for me is going together. That also means that I need to be part of decision making from the beginning. And the donor and the government and those who are in decision making need to invite me into the table from the first curriculum of the situation is happening. That could be OECD.
Well, in this topic, I think we need joined up policies and engage all of society. It's not only for the topic for the state or for the politicians or even for the technicians. It's a topic for all the society, and we need to take care in this approach. Start for the principle and the why, the idea of the human dignity. And many times we start to talk about education, health, work, and so on. But before this approach, we need to think about to promote, restore and protect human dignity of all the people in our communities. And for that we need integrated policies in migration, engage all the different actors in this topic to achieve three main things, three main goals. Unity in diversity, the idea, the motto of the European Union. We need this idea for our societies, not only in European context, but around the world, but also the community of shared future together. And for that, we need the sense of belonging of all of us, part of this society. We need to build this model. It's very difficult. We have many failures, but I believe it's the only way to achieve peace and future for our societies.
Thank you. Maybe we have like 5 minutes left now. Let's finish with a positive question or remark by you guys. In your own work, in your own mission, in your own role on migrant integration, of course, what is one of your greatest successes or one of your biggest challenges about integration migrants?
Day by day to explain to normal citizens why it is better to have a common future, why it is better to work together and not to be frightened, and to make a front against foreigners, and to make a campaign where national is modern again. I think these are boring ideas of the last century. And I think this is the main. These are the main challenges we have and we have to face. And the most beautiful is that you see results. So you see young children who came 3 years ago to my little town, and they are able now to express, and they are even faster in learning language than their parents. It's normal, but it's funny to see that there is a little daughter of 8 coming as an interpreter for her father in society which is not female in first line. So this are things you can watch and you can take and you can learn, and we need the will to learn. And I think this is also the idea of many ideas around migration, that you have the open heart. You need an open heart, and you need to be willing to learn. And this is a solution which is for some in our societies dangerous, because learning has to be open-minded. Open-minded is an unclear future, and this is not good.
Well, I think I mentioned before that our biggest success was the act of Greek citizenship, but I could also add that at the moment that we use our tools in order to empower the people that have arrived the previous 3 years, while it's a challenge, it's something that we are glad to see on an everyday basis while we support them on employability, documentation, language, etc., is the hope that it creates to them, the fact that they might see a person with the same background being an integral part and having an active voice. So a lot of times we get the comment that you make me feel that it's what I'm trying to do is realistic. Yeah.
One of you wants to...
I am going to just share a very small example, which is something we're doing at a community level. And the project that we've started up is around social mobility, education, attainment and employability for young people. We have a very, very mixed community, and one of the messages we had from young people was that they were growing up whilst they were in school. They weren't actually mixing with each other. When it came to break time, it would be people who had Polish background would talk to other children from Polish background, and so it was, and they felt that they weren't really being with their, being integrated in schools, which is a very, very challenging message to hear from young people. So we started a project called Hounslow's Promise, and it's bringing our community together, creating new networks in our community and building that around our schools so that we can actually provide a mentoring scheme for young people and ways in which we can work with our schools to build those links. We believe that's going to be important for the success of those young people in future in terms of them getting jobs, getting to know each other and having confidence about their civic place in society.
The time is left, I think. Yeah, it's time now for Q&A. Thank you very much for your observation, for your remarks, and for your answers. Thank you. Is there a microphone to the audience for the Q&A? Yeah. Where is the microphone? Oh, it's coming. No, it's coming on. Yeah. Here.
Thank you very much. It works?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm from the Secretariat of the OECD and very impressed with your witnesses and experience. We worked in particular with a series of cities to show that places matter for integrating people and coordination matter too. So my question will be very simple. We heard that it's very needed to integrate policies, to integrate people. Okay. It also takes time. And so from your experience in particular, what are the things that have been done recently for refugees, for asylum seekers, that impacted on past generation of migrants? Have you seen something that impact on the community existing before in your cities? To what extent it has changed the perception of segregation, for example?
Yeah, maybe in Greece and also maybe in Denmark, no?
I'm sorry, so if I understand correctly, how the recent policies have impacted the previous communities. Well, particularly in Greece, they the big difference is now that we are actually creating integration policy. While before, the previous generations that arrived in Greece from the 80s, 90s, and zeros were kind of integrating on their own, only through their employment. So due to the latest arrivals, the current policymakers are for the first time creating a solid integration policy. So this is going, we know for a fact that this is going to affect also the already existing migrant communities, but we are still in the process of expecting it.
Maybe a few words about Denmark, the situation in Denmark about this.
I will see. I think we have to look into Greece for now again, because if I'm talking about for 20 years ago in Denmark, there I will say integration was much, much better, where now our integration minister, she is celebrating 50 legislation. She made rules for integration by cake. And that make a huge, and this is this is make a huge difference of how that will impact our children. Rather from when I was a refugee, even being a refugee so many years in refugee camps and centers, I was still able to take an education and take a higher education, being there where I am today. But I'm not sure how that will be happening for the refugees arriving to Denmark in the way the integration policy in taking to account today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for sharing your own experiences and your experiences. Maybe we can upload, no? Yeah, and then, yeah, and the poll, right? And the results of the poll. Yeah, I'm sorry. What about the results of the poll? The question was, where does migrant integration take place? Well, the first answer is 40% for social groups. It's interesting. It's interesting. The second one, school, with 35%, and the last answer, work, with 25%. Do we know how many voters there are? Do we have the answer of how many voters for the poll? No? Okay. Okay, so thank you very much for sharing this with us. Thank you. Yeah. A last word. Sorry, last minute. A last word for Jean-Christophe Dumont, who is the head of International Migration Division.